I will start, please. I'll start once again. Good afternoon, members, officers, members of the public. Welcome to the Southampton District Council Overview and Scrutiny meeting, Thursday, 16th of June. I'll start, please, with apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillors Chan, Jackson, McKay, Spencer, and Councillor Abbott is substituting for Councillor Jackson.
Thank you very much. Item 2, minutes to approve as a correct record the minutes of the committee held on the 21st of April 2022. Members, these have been circulated. Are you happy to approve them as a correct record, please? Yeah, that's everyone. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
Chairman, whilst we're discussing the meetings, Chairman, my problem at the end, the last paragraph of the meeting of the minutes relates to the fact that Councillor Birch effectively said that he wasn't going to seek re-election, this committee ought to record their thanks to Councillor Birch as being chair of ONS for 3 years.
I'm smiling, Councillor Smurden, because I had down to mention under urgent business where we were going next. My thanks, and I'm sure the committee would join with me, and you've made them already. Thanks to Councillor Birch for his sterling chairmanship over the last 3 years, but also to thank Councillor Denise O'Callaghan and Councillor Trevor Pennington, who have been members of ONS for the last 3 years and who have come off now as a result of the constitutional changes. But thank you very much. You're quite right. Thank you, members. Okay, there is no other urgent business to be brought forward that I'm aware of. Councillor Smurden? No. Item 4 is to consider a division of the agenda. Again, I'm not aware of any item of business likely to lead to the disclosure of exempt information. Is any other member aware of any need to divide the agenda? No. Okay, we'll move on then to item 5, declarations of interest. In accordance with the Code of Conduct, members are invited to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests, other registrable interests and non-registrable interests, including the nature and extent of such interests they may have in any items to be considered at this meeting. Looking at no response at all, so that's good. Oh, Councillor Sweet.
Technically, I have an interest because I have a tenancy with Live West, which is for a garage.
Thank you, Councillor Sweet. We'll make a note of that. Okay, in which case we'll move on. Item 6 is public forum. I'm not aware that there are any questions to be raised by the public. No, there are none, in which case we'll go straight on. Item 7, third-party partners, and the first presentation we're going to receive today is from Live West, from Suzanne Brown and Russell Baldwinson. Welcome both. And I would imagine you're going to be presented by Mrs. Blake. Or going straight in?
Going straight.
Going straight in. So yeah, thank you very much. Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting Suzanne and myself along this afternoon. What we're going to do is we're going to give you a canter-through presentation around our activities as an organisation and what we are doing in the South Hams. And I'm going to start by effectively, I'm assuming you've all got a copy of the presentation in front of you. Okay, I'll just hold on a second then. If you'd be so kind as to go to slide 3. So I'm going to give you a very brief introduction to the history of Live West. I'm sure you're aware Live West is an organisation which came about in 2015. It was a merger of Knightstone and ECH housing associations. And prior to that, both organisations came about as a traditional housing association. You'll note that Knightstone and ECH were one in 1974, and then they effectively went their own way and were joined by various different stock transfers from different local authorities, including South Hams' own stock, which came about through the merger of ECH and Tor Homes. So I'm not going to focus on this one for too long, but if we can go to the next slide, please. So you'll see in terms of our organisation, Live West are 34,500 homes there or thereabouts. You'll no doubt be scanning down looking for South Hams. Sorry,
I'll just give you a minute.
Just make it a bit bigger.
Yeah, there we go. And if you like, Sharon, but you just move your microphone slightly.
Yeah, of course. Is that better? So as I was saying, Live West are broadly 38,500 homes. You'll be quickly scanning down looking for South Hams on the list, and you'll see that we own them or manage just under 4,000 homes of that 38,500 homes within South Hams. You'll also see that last year Live West developed 800 new homes, of which 40 were within South Hams, and we presently have 81 under development. And I think a number of you were at a site this morning where we're developing and delivering homes in partnership with Wayne in Ivybridge. You'll also note on the presentation, do I need to pause a moment or? No, I'm fine with that slide. That's the one I'm on. So you'll also note from this slide that in terms of our organisation, we're there around about the 20th largest association nationally. I say that because there are a number of mergers which have recently occurred. We're one of the larger developers of homes nationally. We're the 16th largest developer of new homes in the country. What we're particularly pleased about is we're the 8th largest in respect of the development of new homes for social rent, which is something which we do focus on as an organisation because obviously they are the most affordable form of affordable tenancy. And you'll be able to see how we've been growing as an organisation over the last few years in terms of the scale. So when we merged back in 2018, we were broadly 35,500 homes and we're now broadly 38,500. So we could jump onto the slide, please. So in terms of some brief highlights around the organisation, I've already talked about our scale. We operate within 20 local authority areas where we are either the largest stock owning or the second largest stock owning organisation within the local authority area. Our area of operation is the southwest of the country, as defined on the previous map, which you would have seen. In terms of how we perform in respect of customers, we've got very strong customer service satisfaction scores in relation to our peers. We are, as I said, one of the larger developing associations. Our approach and our aim is to develop 15,000 homes over the first 10 years of Live West, and we're very much on track to do that. We do manage our organisation quite carefully in terms of our exposure to sales products. So we ensure that no more than 30% of our turnover is attributed to such activities. As I said, we developed 1,000 homes last year, and we're on target to develop 1,050 this year, and the programme grows thereafter. We're one of the largest employers within the Southwest. We have 1,400 colleagues, and by way of giving a sense of scale of our reach, our development activities create 6,500 or association with 6,500 roles. We have strong employee satisfaction scores and very strong employee net promoter scores, so we're perceived as a good place to work, which is fantastic. In terms of our ability to cope with what could be a fairly challenging external environment, with lots of talk of headwinds coming our way, we've got 420 million of available liquidity, which puts us in a great position to deliver on our ambitions. We have circa 1 billion borrowing capacity through a European monetary note, which again supports our ability to push forward. We've recently secured just shy of £124 million worth of grant from Homes England to develop 2,550 new homes, and that's in addition to being a Wave 1 strategic partner, which was a commitment to deliver 1,235 new homes, with these coming on board by March 28. And we expect to deliver a surplus of 53 million against a budget of 51.5 million coming forward. So if we can jump onto the next slide, please. So in terms of where we've been recently, we've recently undertaken a review of our corporate strategy, given the changing external environment, given the European Union and the global pandemic that we've all been subjected to. And that's put us in a strong place to deliver on what were our merger objectives. We've reviewed the majority of our sub-strategies, which are operational strategies which support this, and we believe that we're in a good place to make sure that we can continue to function as we have been and develop the homes that we're looking to develop and deliver on our principal merger objectives, which were growth, a robust organisation, and making sure that we're fit for the future. We could jump onto the next slide, please. So in terms of some short metrics, which I'll just highlight, we're targeting 95% of our customers feeling safe in their homes. We are delivering on the government objective to take all the homes which are regulated within the sector or managed within the sector by 2030 to EPCC. We're looking to do that by 2028, so that's an acceleration. And Suzanne will no doubt pick up on one or two the highlights that we're and various projects that we're doing to push that forward. As I've said, we've got strong customer survey, colleague survey results, with 90% of colleagues saying that values and cultures, equality, diversity and inclusion are important, and they're very proud to work for Live West. And we are targeting 40% of our customer interactions being through digital channels. That's something we're working to do. We can have the next slide, please. I'm going to give you a very brief overview of our development activity. Obviously, I looked back and highlighted that we developed 40 affordable homes in the previous year. If you look at the overall performance, you'll see that we've got an overall pipeline of 167 homes within the South Hams, which are either under development or forecast to be developed. Obviously, we'd like to do more, and that's one of the conversations that no doubt we'll have. In terms of what we're doing more widely, you can see how prior to the pandemic, we were delivering approaching 1,250 homes. That had dropped back quite considerably during the last 2 years. Looking forward, we're trying to get back to where we were previously and would expect to be able to achieve that this year. And then looking at growth, assuming that the current economic climate remains relatively unchanged from where we are now for the next 5 years. And of the projects that we're working on, obviously one of those, and I think we were asked a question on it, is Parker's Way in Topness, where we're doing various feasibility studies around what we can develop on the scheme. We've met with the planning team, and we are taking on board their comments and doing a redesign at the moment. And once that's been signed off internally, we'll re-engage with the pre-app process. But hopefully it gives you a sense of scale in terms of where we are organisationally. The reason for the discrepancy in respect to someone's bound to ask, why does it say 52 in 2021, is because 12 of the units are open market, and the previous slide was reporting unaffordable. So it just gives you an idea of the sense of the scale of the organisation and development plans and ambitions. If we can jump onto the next slide, please. So what we've been doing is we've been engaging with local authorities who have a shared purpose. We've been speaking to Izzy, and we've been speaking to other members of your team around how we can do more in the South Hams, and been talking indeed with you in the capacity of the JLP with Plymouth and West Devon. So we very much do see you as a partner in an organisation or a local authority, and us as an organisation where we can work together. We do recognise that there are clear barriers doing more. They're laid out on the screen. I'm not going to go through them one by one, but the big one is land. It's about opportunities. More land equals more supply. The way you increase housing deliveries outlets. And one of the key things that we need to do is understand how we can work better with one another to facilitate more affordable housing. It has to be a clear ambition, but it gives you a sense of some of the barriers that we're facing. I'm going to hand over to Suzanne now, who's going to talk about customer services. And Suzanne, thank you.
Thank you. Just to introduce myself, my name is Suzanne Brown. I'm the Executive Director of Operations at Live West. If we could go through to the next slide, please. And next slide. So this is what I'm hoping to cover. I've tried to pick up some of the questions that came in via email, so I'll try and pick up some of those as we go along. Some of the ones that were very specific, we'll probably email back with with some specific answers to. But if we go to the next slide, we'll start off talking a little bit about allocations. As you're probably aware, in terms of allocations, Live West is a partner with Devon Home Choice, so all of our homes are allocated that way. We recognise the significant levels of demand that exist within the South Hams, so just shy of 1,800 homes needed in terms of individuals actually registered and awaiting a home. In terms of stock turnover of our homes, so as Russell mentioned earlier, we've got about 3,900 homes. Our stock turnover there, we have about 4.7% turnover in South Hams. That's lower than we generally see as an average. It's dropped off generally as during the pandemic anyway, but South Hams is low, and that's partly because of some of the demographics of South Hams that drives that. Somebody asked how many homes we currently got empty. Yesterday, when I asked someone to have a look, it was 14. That doesn't count Parker's Way, obviously, because that is being decanted for demolition. It will be 19 next week because we know we've got some notices coming in. So it's generally around that 14 to 19 mark as we're working through refurbishing homes ready for relet. And then I had a look at, because I thought you might be interested, how many we'd allocated over the last 12 months. Over the last 12 months, we've allocated 184 homes in the South Hams. So that will obviously be a mixture of those ones that have turned over the relets, plus the new build development that Russell has built. Of those 184, 32 of those homes went to households that were designated as homeless households. We move through to the next slide, please. So just to talk you through really where we are in terms of service delivery post-pandemic. So I would say post-pandemic, we're now pretty much back to normal. So our staff are now working out and about in the field, and we've reintroduced our You and Your Home visits. So we undertake a process of You and Your Home visits on a 5-yearly programme where every customer will always get a visit regardless of their interactions with us, and we'll sit down with that customer and have a chat with them around how their tenancy is going, what their aspirations are, talk to them about potential moves and any other issues. That's separate from their transactional interactions with us. One of the things we have identified is that there has been an increase in antisocial behaviour, both during the pandemic, and that has continued actually. We recognise that that is in part due to the additional stresses, I think, that are placed on people within society at the moment, both in terms of post-pandemic, but also financially. And that plays itself out in terms of mental health difficulties and the interactions that people have with each other. We have struggled to get engagement from some of the other statutory services. That has been a challenge for us, but we're hoping that more of those services will come online, although we recognise that actually with organisations under financial pressures, some of those have withdrawn during the pandemic period. We've got backlog of responsive repairs. So our WIP, if you like, our repairs in progress, is about 75% higher than normal. We're reducing it all of the time. We hope to get back to normal by the end of the summer period. The two areas where it's highest, higher than when we want it to be, are South Hams and Plymouth. Those are the areas where we've got a more significant backlog of repairs than we would like. It's challenging for us to try and address that at the moment. We are working, trying to bring external contractors on board, but in reality, there isn't that much external labour available to try and drive that through. Hence why it will probably take us to the end of the summer to get to the level we would generally want to be at. Planned maintenance, we did planned maintenance last year, but it escalates again more significantly this year. And we've got our ongoing communication with customers. Go for the next slide, please. So chatting a little bit about affordability, I think there was a question about rent increases. So our rent increase takes place in April each year. Our rent increase is set out as part in a framework that is agreed by the regulator of social housing, and our rent increase last year was in line with that framework at 4.1%. One of the things we specifically did, though, ahead of that was undertake some detailed rent affordability work work quite closely with our customer base because we wanted to identify what we could do to best support customers with affordability during that period. As a result of that, we allocated an additional £850,000 to support affordability and utilised that in a range of different measures. So, for example, some of the affordable rents that had been converted historically during the 2012 to 16 rent regime that were converted to affordable rents, we converted back to social rents. We've employed our own energy officer to support people around their energy costs. And we allocated and introduced £360,000 specifically to a new tenancy support fund. This fund is available to support people who are struggling with affordability, who are not in receipt of other benefits like housing benefits. So it's specifically for working households who pay all of their rent themselves currently to try and help them with affordability if they're struggling. And we added another £100,000 to our hardship fund. You go to the next slide, please. So, some questions around debt and arrears. Somebody wanted to know the level of current debt. So our debt in South Hams, again, very low, so 1.24% of the debit. Our general debt across the Live West is just about 2%, 2.04%, so about 2%. Our rent debt performance in the sector is top quartile. We've always had good debt collection, performance in terms of arrears. In the South Hams, 80% of rent accounts are clear. Just 5 accounts have debts over £2,000. And actually, when I asked, because nobody asked about evictions, but people did ask about debt, and I thought you might be interested. There were no evictions for rent debt last year. And so far, we've had no evictions for rent debt this year either. We worked very hard to try and keep people in their homes. It's something we did during the pandemic, and it's something very much we would want to continue to try and do. If we go to the next slide, please. Some little bit of specific information in terms of this is supporting customers and in relation to the grants that we make available. So you can see there, specifically for South Hams customers, average grant we've given so far is £234 on average, and that varies around helping people out with, 66% of that is for food and utility support. Some of that is for white goods support. Some of that is when new vulnerable customers are moving into a new tenancy, and we may help out with carpets or other furniture to help them get settled and help them get started. It's a key part of what we do is both our grant giving, but also our tenancy sustainment service. So our tenancy sustainment service is a generally 6-week package of support that we offer to our customers who might be struggling for a range of reasons. So it might be someone who's struggling with debt. It might be someone who's struggling with hoarding. It might be someone who's struggling at home and needs to access a care package, and we'll act and we'll support them to try and access a care package that they need. We go to the next slide, please. Customer engagement, obviously listening to and hearing the voices of our customers is really important to us. We have our own customer scrutiny group. There's 27 customers on that scrutiny group. That group is called In Focus, and they carry out regular reviews of different aspects of our service and report directly on those reviews to our board. In fact, at our last board meeting, they came along and reported in relation to service charges. In addition to that, we provide a wide range of ways in which people can get involved through estate services champions, which is looking out and about at green spaces, cleaning quality and feeding back on the performance of our contractors to us, through to our communications group. And also 590 customers are now signed up through our online platform, which is called Live West Your Views, where we do a lot of our consultation in relation to policies, or changes, and our rent consultation, for example, is often undertaken as well on that online platform, so we can actually engage with that wider group. We are a member of TPAS, and we asked TPAS to undertake an independent review of our customer engagement to get their views. They described our customer engagement opportunities as very good. and said that we had a wide range of structures and facilities in place when they undertook an audit. We go to the next slide, please. In terms of South Hams, obviously last summer we started back again with our community activity, and we will be continuing with our community activity, but you can see range of the community activity that we've been undertaken. We had a skip day in Topness in January. We've been doing some tree planting in Topness in Bridgetown, and more recently more skip days in Bridgetown, and some community holiday activities in Dartmouth, partly funded by with West. Those activities will be continuing throughout the summer. Our community activities tend to be targeted on specific areas where we're trying to address specific issues, quite often related to issues potentially around youth engagement or youth antisocial behaviour, or trying to engage the community in that way. We go to the next slide, please. And the next slide, please. So talk a little bit about our environmental strategy. So our environmental strategy covers a number of areas, our homes, which I'll pick up in a minute, our vehicles, our neighbourhoods, and our workplaces and partners. In terms of our homes, go to the next slide, please. So as Russell may have already mentioned, so all new homes we build to a high EPC rating, that's IB. Our approach is to build based on a fabric first approach, and that's the approach that we're taking as well with our retrofit work. So that's to make sure that we're addressing all the insulation issues with our homes, and we'll then bolt on new technologies as and when we need to, and they become most cost effective, both for us organisationally but also for the customer. One of the key issues that is really important for us is customer affordability, and we need to recognise that some of the new technologies at the moment actually potentially do increase costs for the customer. That's why at the moment we're still installing gas boilers, and we will continue to do that until energy costs or electrical costs are in a position that air source heat pumps become more affordable for people. Russell's already mentioned our target is to achieve EPC-C 2 years ahead of the government's target for all of our rented homes. We've got just over 8,200 rented homes that we need to bring up to C, and that will require an investment in total from us of £36 million. Overall, our decarbonisation agenda has been, we've mapped out the overall investment. Overall investment is just over £800 million to achieve net zero by 2050. It's 850 million. And also a comment there on in terms of new development, but any trees that we do have to remove, we're always replacing on a 2-for-1 basis. We talk a little bit about South Hams. If we go to the next slide, you can see where we are in terms of South Hams and the EPC rating of individual properties there. So 67% of homes are already at C or above, 30% D rated. And overall, our investment in the South Hams will be around about 6.9 million, around about £7 million, based on current costs to bring all of those properties up to a C rating. We have bid and were successful in round 1 of the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, and we're undertaking some projects across the whole of our geography in relation to that. We'll also be anticipating bidding as part of round 2. There wasn't a Devon bid for the round 1 bids had to be put in by local authorities. There was a Plymouth bid and a Wecker bid. There wasn't specifically a Devon bid for that funding. But we are picking up some properties where we're undertaking pilots in South Hams area through the last of the local authority delivery scheme funding, the LADS funded projects. We're aware of, we've got 125 properties that need significant investment to reach these, so we will look at those closely and the long term for those properties to work out what the long term solutions are, and what the appropriate investment is there. We go to the next slide, please. I think one of the other things sometimes we're asked about is disposals. Sometimes where we recognise that a property isn't fit for purpose, so this could be that it's structurally unsound, it could be that it is in relation to a support scheme that is no longer in use, no longer required, and there's no longer any demand. Might be inappropriate room sizes, don't meet current room standards, for example. We look at disposing of homes. In terms of disposals in the South Hams, actually, it's been a low level of disposals. Last year there was one. We do always discuss them in detail with local authority representatives, and actually very willing to take people around to have a look at them, and have done that in the past where people have been interested in seeing the condition of them. Currently got nothing in the pipeline for 22-23. Doesn't mean there won't be anything. There may well be things that come up. We don't ever dispose of anything that's occupied. So we review properties when they become empty. And then a note now on Parkers Way regeneration scheme. So obviously Parkers Way regeneration schemes currently working through with the planners the final outcome there. But most of the existing properties are now vacated there, which has been very successful. Actually, there's been really good engagement from the customers there who've been successfully able to move. Though it was mixed tenure, some people had exercised their right to buy, which is obviously a challenge when you want to undertake regeneration, but we have been able to engage with those homeowners, and again repurchasing of those homes is progressing, if not finalised by now. So that's been successful. So that will be going ahead once we finalise that. And I think that is it in terms of this last thing in terms of contacts. So I'm aware, obviously, you've got myself and Russell here. Those are our emails if you ever need to contact us. Obviously, the local representative, the area manager, some of you will know is Joe Bashford, and some of you will be in regular contact with him. And the regional manager who covers both sort of Plymouth, South Hams and Cornwall is Luke Diamond. So contact details for Luke are there. Next slide, please. We're very happy to pick up any questions you may have on either what we've covered or other things that you wanted to know about that you think we might not have covered. We'll see what we can do here on the spot, or if not, we might have to come back to you with an email.
Thank you both very much. Okay, well, I think what makes sense to start with, members of this committee and other elected members asked questions in advance. So if I ask anybody who's asked a question in advance, would you like to pick up on your questions at this stage? Councillor Birch, and then I'll come to the leader. Councillor Birch.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. In the list of questions that I submitted, my screen's just gone round. The last question I submitted was, I quote, how would you describe your working relationship with the South Hams District Council relating to addressing of the housing emergency declared by the council? Bearing in mind that you are a major property owner within the district, I think you must be around 10% of the housing stock within South Hams. Clearly, in addressing the housing emergency, how would you describe your relationship with the district council in dealing with that, bearing in mind your position?
Sorry, that's the best. I'll pick that one up if that's okay. So I would say it's good. I would say it's one of the better relationships we have with local authorities. We've met with Izzy, we've met with Chris, and we've met them jointly in the capacity of South Hams and West Devon, but we've also met with Port Barnard as well. We've had some good conversations around how we can do more. I would say the conversations have been pretty open and frank. We didn't pull any punches, and the guys listened and we listened back. We don't always get that. I would say that some of the ideas that Judy asked a question, and I'll pick that one up now as part of the response. So we were talking about how we effectively do more, and the best way of doing more is to create outlets. It's a relatively simple equation. The way of doing that is to prioritise the delivery of affordable housing, because across the South Hams, and to be frank, most of the Southwest, affordable demand is such that if you build homes in a location, there will be demand for them. You're not relying on saturation rates, which are influenced by selling homes. we're in a fairly strong market at the moment. It does look to be cooling off a little bit. That could result in a slowdown in homes being built. But if you're building homes for affordable, there is always demand, certainly for rented homes, and we probably find that demand remains strong for shared ownership as well and other affordable home ownership products, because they're more affordable now. Help to Buy has fallen away. I think that possibly one of the questions we were asked was prioritising land for affordable housing or giving first refusal. I think it's a good idea. I'm not going to say anything other than that. I think you probably need to be a little bit wary of the impact that might have. I think that we're a Homes England strategic partner. We have significant funding from Homes England. What the grant funding enables us to do is in lower or medium value areas, and that doesn't necessarily relate to the whole of the South Hams, being candid with you. A lot of it is very high value area. It means that we can pay open market land values for land. In higher value areas, landowners, even if you prioritise it, unless they're a little bit philanthropic or they're that way inclined, they're unlikely to make it available. One of the key things that would probably work well alongside that as an approach is, and this is something that we've talked about with Izzy, and I think you've been having conversations about it, I know you are, internally, is allocating a planning officer and development officers to affordable projects. And actually, that could be for policy compliant as well, because you want to encourage policy compliance on Section 106. Section 106 delivers more affordable homes than housing associations. So you've got to target both. But we're having some really good conversations. We're looking at one of your land opportunities at the moment to see whether it's possible to deliver affordable housing on it. That's not normally very forthcoming from a local authority. So I would definitely put you as a minimum of good, if I'm being frank. And it's not because it's sat next to me.
Can I just follow that up then? What do you see as your biggest challenge in providing more housing in South Hams? And in trying to meet that challenge, how can the council assist you?
So there's a couple of things. I think the first one is land opportunities. Housing is delivered when there are more opportunities available, and it's about how quickly and how expediently you can navigate your way through the planning system as well. So it's about having frank and open conversations with a resource that means that the pre-app stage is productive and the planning application stage is smooth. I think it's also from a local authority perspective, dare I say it, it's having buy-in to the principle so that when we get to committee, there aren't any unexpected results from the committee. So I think that if you can join that process up, I think it will work really well. I think you've got some real challenges around the value of land and homes, the number of large settlements you've got, because housing generally gets developed in larger settlements. I think it's about probably targeting the larger settlements and targeting locations in relation to infrastructure, which relates to principal settlements, which relates to jobs, because that's how house builders generally look at it. And I think it's not just about affordable housing delivery in the purest context of what we would look at. I think it's about making sure that you've got appropriate levels of allocation, actually looking beyond your 5-year housing land supply, because allocations nationally don't align with the numbers that are required. So the 300,000 homes which the government often talk about, there's only 200,000 homes allocated, and that's through local plans, and that's assuming a 5-year housing land supply. The whole process doesn't join up. So it's about making more available, basically.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, we've kind of had some of the answers, but specifically to question 1, this isn't all going to happen by building new houses. And whilst I understand that people have lifetime tenancies, there is the ability for them to move house when they no longer need a large house, so that people who need large houses can upsize into the house they're leaving. So I'm interested to hear that you interview people every 5 years, but I would have thought for some people, maybe the interview needs to be more often so that you can get a better grip on whether they'd be prepared to downsize.
Shall I pick? I'm quite happy to pick that.
Yeah,
I'm happy to pick that up. I think that, one of the things that we're very specifically looking at is with lifetime tenancies, how do we encourage people to downsize and what is the optimum point at which you do that? And we recognise that actually it's not necessarily by offering incentives, it's more by offering the right property at the right time. And that's a specific piece of work we're trying to look at now. Quite often, I think, the downsizing sort of interactions and conversations happen at a point which is too late. So if I take my own parents, okay, my own parents don't live in South Hams, but my own parents live in a 4-bedroom property, they're in their 80s. The ability to them to downsize at the current time and to move away from what has been their lifetime home, it is just not going to happen. So I think, and the reality was probably if the point at which they really needed to downsize was probably when they were 15, 20 years younger. But at that point in time, it's just not what they're looking at doing. So we've got to work between us, I think, and I don't think this is something that we have the solution to or you have the solution to find out what is it that at those particular points in time might incentivize somebody to say, I want something different. Now, where I think it has been successful, and I think this is where it relates to sometimes to new build, as part of new build developments, if you can build specifically the smaller types of units that people find attractive for downsizing in a good location that is local to them and give them first preference to those homes, that can actively encourage downsizing. And that's where I've seen it work most successfully, to be honest with you. So I think there is an argument for having linked to new development, who looking at, this is a new development, who in that area might be interested in a downsize. Let's proactively have conversations with those people at an early stage and see if we can get some engagement. But the general idea of, well, it will incentivize people to move, in my experience, just ends up paying people to move that would have moved anyway, rather than necessarily it's making it easy that makes a difference. It's having a home that is new, that is well insulated, that is affordable, that is carpeted, that is having the move, that is having the furniture removals arranged. That's a whole package that's there on your doorstep. So what you're doing is you're taking the keys and you're going to somewhere lovely. That might make you give up the wonderful 3 or 4 bedroom terraced house that you've got in South Hams that you've lived in for years, but there isn't much else that's going to, I think.
As to the second one, I'm slightly worried that you're telling us to rely on market housing coming forward, because the problem with market housing that I think you've alluded to is that it's only built out at the rate they can sell them at. So that means that we only get the affordable housing at the rate they can sell the market houses, which is not as soon as we'd like them. So that's why I think we'd be really interested in some sort of joint venture with you if we can deliver in a different way.
Yeah, so we have, in answer to your question, we're not doing any joint ventures presently with local authorities. We have done historically. We've had a very successful joint venture with Cornwall, which we've explained to your colleagues who we've met with. What it normally involves is a range of interventions. More challenging sites generally need better sites to help fund them. So you tend to look at things in a portfolio, and that's something we did with Cornwall, where we delivered 300 homes across a dozen or so sites. Some were open market led, some were solely affordable, a high value market site subsidising the affordable housing delivery. I'm not promoting Section 106 and house builders as the answer. What I'm saying is, if you want to deliver more homes, you need to make more land available. We will happily develop as many homes as we possibly can within the South Hams if the opportunities are there. But if you've got more organisations doing more in your geography, then you'll see bigger outturns. We do focus on affordable housing first and foremost. You saw the numbers. We do about 150 market homes a year compared to in excess of 1,000 affordable. And we do it for two reasons. Firstly, it gives us a route into the affordable homes delivered through Section 106, and we look to deliver at policy levels, but just get that one out there. And secondly, it provides us with subsidy where we can actually generate returns which we can then gift from the subsidiary company to the parent. What we generally find is that affordable housing requires subsidy. So if you're looking at an affordable site, it generally requires subsidy from ourselves, Live West, internal subsidy generated through our own funding, which is debt finance, and our own internal subsidies. It requires grant funding, and it often requires a very low land value, which is potentially how a joint venture can work with a local authority. If you're looking for significant capital receipts, it doesn't always work. It will work on some opportunities, but not all. It will very much happily work with you on such opportunities. It's just a case of possibly pulling a number together, because if you're looking at one difficult one initially, the answer will probably be it's going to be very challenging. If you're looking at it as part of a portfolio, then you can take a blended approach across it.
So the next one, this doesn't have to be a long answer, but what's your take on the sale of your houses to tenants?
In terms of, so right, is this the right to buy question? This is the right to buy question. So okay, so I think we have to recognise that people aspire to own their own homes, and people do aspire in the UK generally to own their own homes. And we organisationally do what we can try and do to support that. We do that through shared ownership. We do that through market sale. We will be in conversation with the government, where, as and when they talk to us, and to develop the proposals around right to buy. For some people, it has been really successful. For some people, it has been absolutely disastrous. I know people, it has changed their lives. I know people that moved in to and purchased their own home through former right to buy that ended up losing their home, and it destroyed their families. I think there are challenges, absolutely, Judy. You only need to walk around North Prospect in Plymouth and you can see the difference between the homes that have been easily invested in through regeneration, that were not purchased through right to buy and are now predominantly privately led, and those homes that the council retained ownership for. That said, so I think we have to work out, how do we make this work? If we do make it work, how do we have conversations with people so people really understand what they're getting into? Because that, for me, has been always the big challenge. Quite often people see this, oh, fantastic, I can own my own home, but don't necessarily understand all the implications of that in terms of ongoing maintenance, ongoing payments. And I think historically, those housing organisations, ourselves included, and local authorities that were selling homes through the right to buy, didn't necessarily we didn't take it upon ourselves to give all the advice to people that we maybe should have done around the implications. And I think that's my one key learning around what we need to look at doing in the future. It's very early days in terms of discussions. We know that right to buy numbers will be capped. I don't think that's something that will go down necessarily well with the public in terms of being, having to wait. Our view is the important thing is for every home that is sold, we want to be able to replace that home, and we need to have the appropriate funding from the government to replace that home. And one of the things that needs to be built into the scheme is recognising the lag between those two things, because it will take time. If we sell a home now, it'll be 4 years before a home's replaced. So how do you build that into a scheme so that you don't have a deficit? So a lot to think about, lots to do, but I think it's important that we're part of discussions so that we can inform the future direction, so that we get something that works for those individuals who have that home ownership aspiration, alongside making sure that there's adequate supply for the future by replacing what.
I just add two things to that. I think the first one is that they've run a pilot in the Midlands, and I think that if you look at the statistics, worryingly only 5% of the homes which were sold were replaced, which is the main problem, because in practice, if we are fully subsidised, we will look to replace the homes, but obviously the barrier to doing that is land. there is a common theme here. I think the second thing which you probably got to think about is if you think that whether it's £450 or £600 a month, the range of an affordable social rent, and then you're looking at average house prices in the southwest of about 270, and the Southlands is a lot higher than that as an average. The differential between what is currently being paid as a rent with effectively a landlord who's providing you with repairs, maintenance to support your tenancy, or a mortgage which would be significantly in excess of that with all the responsibility with the purchaser, I'm not sure how you make that stack up financially. So I'm not sure how great the take-up will actually be where you have homes in higher value areas.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pierce. Can we just leave the fourth question for a minute? I just want to see if anyone else has got any. Thank you. That'd be great. Councillor Smurden.
Thank you. I was interested in what you said about Section 106. Section 106 delivers more affordable housing, I think, what you said. So how does that work across the southwest, your area, where other authorities have got SIL, the community infrastructure levy? Because I know that this council has in some circumstances, it's sometimes criticised for the fact that we have not adopted SIL, and it's something that we haven't done. But could you just explain? So how does it work in other authorities where there is a SIL?
Yeah. So basically, what I was trying to say was that the number of homes delivered directly by housing associations through funding and grant funding is lower nationally than the number of homes that's delivered through Section 6. So volume house builders deliver more homes than housing associations on an annual basis, and the Section 106 homes that they deliver through that process is greater than the number of homes delivered by housing associations on their own. So I think it's about making sure that you've got both doing the most they possibly can. In terms of where local authorities have SIL, then they can find themselves in a situation where they have viability challenges and they end up delivering lower provisions of affordable housing on larger sites with significant infrastructure, which is relative to the site and unique to the site. Southwest does see, on average, below policy levels of affordable housing delivered. It varies across different local authorities. But notwithstanding that, the outcome of that is still greater than housing associations delivering directly procured homes on sites which they've secured and are delivering as affordable housing. I'm not saying they deliver it better. As developers, I think we deliver better homes, but they do deliver more.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sweet.
Yeah, thank you. Couple of questions. I know you've mentioned about Parker's Way, and that you'll go back to the pre-app stage. Do you have a kind of anticipated time when the properties will be ready?
It's a difficult one to answer. I think that probably in the next 6 to 8 weeks we'll be in a position where the application is formally lodged. We've done all the design work. We've taken all the comments. We need to have an internal review. We need then to present those back to officers and make sure that officers are happy. I think it looks great, but I might have a vested interest because I want it to happen. But as I'm sure we all do, it will then take as long as the planning application process takes, and then procuring a contractor to build on site, and then the discharge of all of the pre-commencement conditions. So invariably, from planning application submission, these things can take sort of 18 months before they're on site. It's purely because of discharging conditions, procuring, contracting, and then starting on site. So
a couple of years, 2 3 years.
Based on the number of homes, it's probably about 16 months build. So you're probably looking at somewhere in the region of about 3 years, maybe a little bit longer until it's complete.
Okay.
But don't hold me to it.
But it's something I am being asked. I know tenants that moved out, and and homeowners. Yeah, just a kind of
But look, it's one we're fully committed to as an organisation. We want to see it happen. We're investing in it quite heavily in terms of compensation to customers who are in homes and buying the homes back there. So we're well on with the scheme, and we're fully immersed in it now. So it is something that's
taken. The other thing on my list, I live up in Bridgetown actually, and there's Live West have quite a lot of open space up there, small areas of open space. So I asked this question, I think 2 years ago when you made the presentation about, you know, sort of community projects like community composting and gardens and allotments. Is that anything that you ever think about or have? I know that obviously you probably think about it from time to time. But I don't know if you've got an officer or I know
We do. So our community connector for the area, and we've been doing some projects in Bridgetown as you've seen. Our community connector for the area would do exactly projects like that. We do community project, composting projects. We do allotment projects and things. If that's what the community there are interested in, and if that's what's going to engage people, then that's absolutely the type of thing.
So how is the best way to kind of start to enable that? Because I know when I asked before, it was everything like that was on hold.
So via Joe, but certainly I can take that back as well anyway, and ask the community connector to be in touch with you. And
that would be really good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Councillor Blackstone.
On a regular basis, people coming in, flooring, food. All that was it is on a very okay.
I'll pick that one up. So our policy is not to automatically remove any flooring, but we will remove flooring if it's in a poor condition or if it's unsafe. If we believe that it's appropriate for the next customer, then obviously we would leave it there or just get it cleaned if it's carpet. So it's not an automatic removal. We have some sums of money that we will help people who are generally moving as a homeless household into one of our homes for carpeting. But we will, the same way we'll support people to apply for a range of charities, because quite often when people move in, if they're homeless, they need a range of things. So they might, for example, we might fund a fridge, your charity might fund some carpets. It quite often ends up being a number of different organisations that have come together to provide support. But our policy is not to automatic. Historically, it was, I think, a while ago, but for some time now, it hasn't been to automatically remove carpets. If they're serviceable, we will always leave them there, or any flooring, we will leave it there if it's serviceable and of a reasonable standard for the next customer.
So if I receive any further applications, then I can refer them to you for an application for a grant for flooring?
But they can come to us for an application for grant for flooring. They may or may not be successful. Obviously, what I'm saying is that generally for flooring, we'll support customers who are homeless households, not necessarily transferring households. It will depend on the circumstances. And as I say, like yourselves, we've got limited funds. It's a set pot of funds. Once it's been, we use it every year. So I say once it's been used up, it's been used up. But yes, you can refer, some of the applications you might want to consider yourself. Some of the applications might be suitable for us to have a look at. Yeah.
Yeah, because we don't just do grants for flooring.
We
for white goods and all sorts.
Yeah.
But it was the policy of you actually stripping out every house of their flooring.
Yeah, we don't do that anymore.
No, okay.
Yeah, we don't do that anymore. And as I say, for homeless households, we will look at trying to support through provision carpets where potentially we can.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
Thank you both. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. I just want to go back a little bit on your presentation, if I may, on rent arrears. How much cash flow problems does this cause? How much slack do you give to the tenants? And have you got any vehicles in place to recover? And the other one was a comment really on the right to buy. My concern aren't so much with the people that buy them or the restocking of what we have, because that could be a major problem as far as I see it. And if we could find a way around that, that would be great. Thank you.
I think your point that the key issue with the right to buy is how do you restock and how do you restock quickly? That's I don't think there is, finding a solution to that. I think it will be a challenge. I think in terms of debt, as I said, actually the rent debt in South Hams is very low. Doesn't cause us any significant issues. Our bad debts is below where we anticipate it would be and where we predict it would be in terms of our budgeting. In terms of managing debt, we will provide support to customers to try and help them agree repayment agreements. So we'll always go through a process if somebody goes into debt of trying to agree with them an appropriate repayment arrangement. Obviously, if somebody is continually breaking that arrangement but has the ability to pay, then we would seek legal recourse and we will go to court and we will obtain possession orders, and eventually that can result in eviction. But we do have a very low number of evictions a year. So we said 38,500 properties. I think the total evictions last year across all of our stock was around about 30. We're none in South Hams, so we will try and do everything we can to support people. Somebody losing their home just actually puts somebody quite often back into the system. So we recognise that. So we do a lot of work to try and make that not happen, albeit unfortunately it does sometimes, and that is where people choose not to engage with us.
Thank you very much. Okay, members, I'm going to go to Councillor Abbott, then I'm going to go back to the leader, and then I think I'm going to draw this agenda item to a close because we've had a lot of time on this. Councillor Speak, yes, thank you. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. As I was saying earlier, I was pleased to see some of your houses in Ivy Bridge this morning. I got into discussion about room sizes and government standards and the requirement for you as an organisation to meet government standards by 85%, which sounded an intriguing level if you were to get funding. And whatever about government rules and that sort of variation, it made me wonder whether you're able to help us to develop our joint local plan and the rules that are in there so that we can set things like needing full government space standards or whatever it is that you see from your perspective, and how we might improve. Maybe these things happen, but I don't know.
So I think, yeah, absolutely. I think it probably goes more wider than that. I think what we're finding at the moment is a lot of local authorities, and it's not unique to yourselves. This is quite general. Are looking at a number of improvements to what it is they're seeking to achieve, whether it's space standards or environment. Seems to be a very key one, and I think it's about making sure that there are no unintended consequences, and we're very happy to engage and assist. We've got a technical team headed up by a colleague called Glynis Paul. Glynis also heads up our environmental element of the business as well, and we're very happy to engage with you on that. We've engaged with Plymouth in quite a detailed way, and we're more than happy to share that with you more widely. That wouldn't be an issue whatsoever.
Thank you. Councillor Austin.
Yeah, thank you. I was with Councillor Abbott this morning and visited your homes in Ivy Bridge, and they really are great. I can well understand why people want to live in them. They're fantastic homes. We have 5 3-bedroom homes that are available for rent at the moment in Ivy Bridge. I believe they went on the site on about Tuesday, and there's apparently 111 bids so far for them. I'm contacted by residents who are kind of saying they're a bit despondent over the likelihood of being able to obtain a home like that. They obviously want one. They're a great product. they want to take on the rent and so on. Is that normal, or is it just that Ivy Bridge is incredibly popular?
Got to press the button. That's absolutely normal. So the demand across the southwest for family-sized homes is huge. And as you saw, if you saw the numbers of people who are registered within the South Hams for a home, 1,760, I think it is. You know, we're the largest social landlord, and we're letting 184 a year. So just to let to everybody currently on the list is going to take 10 years without any increasing, additional demand there. So it's not unusual at all. We can often get hundreds of bids on properties. The only areas where there are lower levels of demand is in respect of sheltered housing is one of the areas of lower levels of demand. But even there, we'll get generally between 10 to 15 bids. Last time I was looking at some.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you for indulging me. Right, my question 4. This is about looking at the next call for sites when we are talking about the local plan. And it would seem to me, I don't think we'd be expecting 100% affordable housing, but at the moment we only get 30% from regular developers. But if we could push that up to say 50 or 60%, we'd welcome it with open arms. So is that something that you might be interested in or would look to do at all or not?
So in answer to the question, we would happily develop more sites in the South Hams. I'm not going to make any qualms about that. In terms of how those sites could be delivered, I think it needs to be looked at on a site-by-site basis. But if the demand is there and it had local support, we would happily develop 100% affordable housing in locations. We can do that because we have the funding available to do it both externally and through grant funding. I think we would also happily deliver policy levels or above policy levels, but recognising that there would be an element of market sale on those sites. Well, that would be absolutely fine. I think what I would be hesitant against is driving an affordable housing policy that's too high, because you've got to look at neighbouring local authorities and look at what their policies are, and commercial house builders and speculative developers will favour those areas first and foremost. And I always go back to the point of outlets. The more that you can make available, the more you're helping the housing problem, because the demand is there. So yes, in answer to your question, one of the things we would happily do is assist through the SHLAR process as well. And I'll be candid with you, that provides us with the opportunity to engage with commercial landowners because we become aware of them and potentially deliver affordable housing. But I think it should be unique to us. The opportunity should be afforded to each affordable housing provider, even if we're doing the most. If we're all doing it, then you'll see more affordable housing delivered. I think one of the things that we talk to Isley about is whether or not there can be an opportunity whereby we're looking at the period beyond the local plan period, and we're finding a way of collaborating and working with you so that the really large sites don't go to the commercial house builders, and then collaboratively we can focus on affordable housing delivery supported by placemaking. Because what we don't want to see is really strong commercial returns going to shareholders. We'd like to see really good schemes which are delivering appropriate levels of affordable housing, and there's significant investment going into the locality. It helps us because if we've got well-designed, attractive places to live, we get less antisocial behaviour and we get lower turnover of tenants because they want to remain there because it's a great place to live. So the shared objective provides additional benefits as well.
That's exactly what we'd be looking for, because a lot of the commercial developments really are not providing that great places to live, and just feel that you could deliver more affordable housing and much better places to live, but within the same financial envelope.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Like I said, message loud and clear. Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Only remains for me to thank you both very much for your time and the exceptionally comprehensive nature of the answers to our questions. Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having us today. It's good to be able to sort of share what we know and listen to where you are, and we'd very much like to do more with you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Councillor Spurs just asked, will we have a copy of those slides? Thank you. Yeah, that's good. We'll circulate to all members. Thank you. Okay, just pause for a quick personnel change. I think we're now going to hear about Southwest Mutual Bank, Mr. Greenham, and I'm guessing that Councillor Bastone, you will be introducing this part of the agenda.
Yeah, if I could introduce Tony Greenham of Southwest Mutual Bank. We also have Pauline Henstock on Teams in case we need any reference. But I would just like to say that we as a council grant funded £50,000 a few years ago, in 2018, I think it was, to the Southwest Mutual Bank, and that actually came from our business rates pooling gain at that time. So that's all I need to say as an introduction. And Chairman, if I let Tony do his brief, I think he said he's only going to do about 5 minutes. Is that right? 10? Or is it 20 or 30?
Well, if chairs agree with it, I have provided a 5-page paper, but I thought I'd spend 5 minutes summarising the contents and setting the context and then go into questions if that suits. Thank you for the introduction, and indeed, put the microphone on. Thank you, Councillor Buxton, for the introduction, and indeed, you filled in some of the background which I was going to say. So I'm Tony Greenham, I'm the Executive Director of Southwest Mutual. I must, for the record, if you give me, clarify that we are not yet a bank. You're not allowed to use the word bank without appropriate regulatory permission. So we, since we had funding from South Hams and 4 other district councils within Devon, also Plymouth City Council, alongside a number of private investors, we have been developing the proposition to work towards a regional mutual bank dedicated to the inclusive and prosperity of the Southwest. As I set out in the paper, and I'll go into a little bit more detail, we have discovered that that task has stumbled across multiple regulatory barriers and obstacles, which we couldn't necessarily have anticipated, which is why we're not there yet. However, I must emphasise that it remains the aim of the board to what we now have is a new strategy to build towards that in a more stage-by-stage process, and I'll be very pleased to present what we want to launch as our first product, if you like. So what I haven't put in the paper, and I wasn't intending to do, was to rehearse the arguments as to why it's a good idea to have one of these. I'm going to assume some familiarity with that, but please do ask any questions about the economic and social case for a regional mutual bank for the Southwest. But if I can take that case as read, the question is, countless times over the last 2 years, but the COVID pandemic and the resulting economic disruption and the economic uncertainty caused us a major sort of derailment of our progress a couple of years ago as we were seeking to raise investment. We have managed to keep going, albeit at a slower pace. But that's the first point I wanted to make. The second obstacle we've faced, which is mentioned in the paper, is that there was a plan that ourselves and the other groups around the country also seeking to set up regional mutual banks could work together to share costs to improve the economies of scale of what we're doing. This is a model that is commonplace in other countries. After legal advice and conversations at reasonably senior level with competition authorities, it turns out to essentially be illegal in the UK. So that's a problem. It's not a showstopper, but that's one thing that we found out. The second barrier we faced is that registered as a cooperative society, that the Cooperative and Community Benefits Society Act 2014. Apologies for getting a little bit sort of jargony on this. It turns out to be not fit for purpose for setting up a new cooperative bank within the UK. This is the first time anybody's tried to do it. That's an unfortunate result. It wasn't one that we or anybody else anticipated, but having tested it with the Financial Conduct Authority, the problem essentially is that although the Act is 2014, the basic legislation dates from the Victorian era. Okay, so it's an accident of history, really, that in this country, the mutual financial services sort of went into homes, building societies, and insurance, where those have been the big areas, and not into banking. And that's quite unusual because in other countries, as I say, cooperative banks are a mainstay of the high street banking setup, and quite often came out of agriculture, actually, in countries like Germany and France. So we have a way of trying to fix that by creating a new legal form for cooperatives. I'm actually presenting that at the Cooperatives Congress on this weekend in Birmingham. We've done that with Cooperatives UK, with PricewaterhouseCoopers, and with Anthony Collins Solicitors. So we think that we can create a better format for running a cooperative bank, and indeed any new cooperative startup that requires a large amount of capital, because this is part of the problem. So that was another obstacle. We're working on a solution for that. But as you would probably see from this, although we're not down and out, this has all caused huge delay and additional expense to the whole project. I mean, not entirely borne by us. We've been working closely with our partners in Bristol, Avon Mutual, that wish to serve Bristol and West of England area. So what we've done at Southwest Mutual is we took a while to do a sort of review of the strategy, and we decided that the best way forward, and one actually which, having embarked on it, we're very excited about, is to launch as a non-bank business lender. The significance of being a lender that only to businesses is that if your loans are over 25,000 and you're not taking deposits off the general public, you do not need regulatory permissions. So that saves a huge amount of cost and delay. I mean, there are a number of business lenders actually operate in South Hams and Devon more broadly that do this. And so that's where we're going to start. In our case, it will be, with a strong purpose, because the businesses we want to serve are those food and farming businesses that are seeking to greatly improve their environmental performance. So we use the phrase agroecology. If you're not familiar with that, you may have heard of the term regenerative agriculture. And if you're not familiar with that, the best way I can describe it is nature-friendly farming. So this is a form of farming that enables you to reduce, potentially to zero, the amount of chemical inputs that are required. So fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides. Now, that's been a good thing to do for the environment. It is now increasingly a good thing to do for the profitability of the farm. As you all no doubt be aware, the cost of such farm inputs have increased rapidly as a result of the Russian-Ukraine war. However, what we've discovered in our research is that banks are not necessarily able to lend to such businesses because a significant change to their existing business is a bit like a startup, and banks do struggle to fund startups. However, that's where we come in, because we will be able to offer much more flexible funding to those businesses. And in fact, our entire aim is to be able to finance farming businesses that want to make this change in their production methods to get rid of the chemical inputs. The benefits that come from this are improved soil health, improved water quality, improved biodiversity, healthier crops. But it takes investment. It takes investment to do it. Without that investment, they're not going to be able to do it. But we want to provide that funding. So where I'll end is with the positive note. So it has been difficult to make progress towards our aim of starting a full bank. But the positive note is that our starting point of funds to finance this shift to more nature-friendly farming is one which I'm getting good responses about, good support for. We're doing it in partnership with the Food Farming Countryside Commission, which is active in Devon, with an inquiry led by David Fursden. And we hope that within the next few months, it'll become clear whether I've managed to put my hands on £20 million to lend to farmers, plus the other capital we need, or not. But hopefully that will be our first step into actually beginning to make loans and serve the market. And one which I hope you agree, actually, that sector is highly relevant to the South Hams and in many other the Devon districts as an important part of not just the economy, but the cultural and social fabric of the place that we live in.
Scrutiny, thank you very much. Great presentation. Councillor Birch.
Yes, thank you for your presentation and thank you for your report. Your report shows that your deficit over the 3 years of I'll use the word loosely, trading, is over £700,000, and that your share capital is 720, which presumably is the funding from the local authorities. Your accounts show you've got £11,000 left, so doesn't look too good there as far as funding is concerned. I mean, looking at the figures here, it seems to me that you may have a liquidity problem in the very near future. In that case, will you be coming to the local authorities and requesting more funding, or where will you get the funding from? So that's my first question. My second question is this: is that it was a while back when you, I don't know whether it was you or whether it was one of your colleagues, gave a presentation to council, but it was certainly in the what I would call the old council. And I think that probably most of the councillors here were not on the council at the time you made the presentation. That being the case, it seems to be, bearing in mind that South Hams is a major shareholder, or one of the major shareholders, and that there's been a change of direction in your and developing your organisation. I would have thought that it would have been appropriate for you to come along to us as a shareholder saying, look, we came here in whenever and we said we're going to do A, B and C. That's not going to work now. We're going to do D, E and F. We want you to authorise us to do that because you are a shareholder. And it seems what I find disturbing is that you've changed direction, but you haven't come to us as a shareholder saying this is what we're going to do and we hope you're happy with that. So those are my two questions.
Second one first is that we send updates relatively regularly, well, I don't know regularly, but every few months or when something significant happens to all members, which you would have received, which have outlined these.
Well, I certainly do. So, I mean, the point is, if you're going to make a major change of direction, I thought the least you should have done is actually either come to the executive or come to this committee and explain and get the go-ahead from the council. That doesn't seem to have happened. And it does concern me.
Well, I think that's requesting a different relationship to the one we've had. I'm very open to having that relationship if that's the one you like. But it's a mutual with one member, one vote. You rank alongside 100 other members, and this is a management level change. It's not one that needs approval of an annual general meeting. But you've been invited to all the annual general meetings as a shareholder. I'm not sure that anyone has attended. I can't recall. I didn't. So this is not a sudden change. This is all the developments I've outlined in my paper have been, a lot of them are in the annual report from last year, which was published many months ago. So I don't think there's been a lack of reporting, to be perfectly honest. But I think what I'm hearing from you is that you had an expectation, or at least perhaps we can now call that a request, for a more close involvement and close regular updates to the executive or someone else who perhaps you'd like to nominate. I'm very happy to put that in place.
I think it's what it boils down to, is we want to know what you're doing with our money.
We have audited accounts and we communicate with our members. So I'm content that we are fully reporting on what we have done with members and shareholder money.
And what about my first question?
Yeah, so on funding, yes, well, you're absolutely right. We need to seek more funding, and at the moment I have a number of applications in with grant funding organisations with an interest in sustainable food and farming, of which we've had one since the year end that's noted in the paper, and 3 other applications currently in progress that would take us through to the point where we would be investment ready for the investment in the fund. And I also have a number of conversations ongoing for the money that would go in the actual fund, including one bank, because one of the advantages of this is that we can actually get wholesale funding from banks because we're a non-bank lender now, and also one conversation which probably isn't appropriate yet to name, but for the first £1 million with a social impact. However, there is a risk that I do not get these grant applications. They do not come through, and we have to dissolve the company. I mean, that's
Is there any liability on the part of this council?
No, of course not. It's not to that.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Graham. I've got a question for you actually. On the competition law barriers. So presumably originally, when you set up, you envisaged working with other mutuals, as you said. Therefore, was it a surprise that these barriers had come up? Was it anticipated that it would be plain sailing, and then it hasn't been that?
We never anticipated being plain sailing. I mean, there was a risk in the original share offer prospectus, which was the one which as Councillor Batstone points out, the grant, the economic development grant, in fact, was used as an investment for which you had a shareholding. Two of the key risks we outlined was the competition law, that we may not be able to do this model. Another one we outlined was that the banking regulators may reject the mutual structure. Unfortunately, both those risks have come true. The competition law one, it's actually a grey area. I presented it to you as a definite result. It's the paper actually explains the nuance about that through the support we've had with parliamentarians, and in particular, I would commend the work of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Fair Business Banking and its chair, Kevin Honenrake, who are constantly promoting this model to the government. I've spoken at senior level at both the Financial Conduct Authority and Competition Authority. It's possible that it's not illegal, but that's not enough certainty for us to do it. So it would require a Secretary of State direction to clarify that we're able to work with these other models. So it's not an unsolvable problem. I can't see it being a political priority for the Secretary of State for Business to solve this little obstacle for us, when I'm sure there's plenty of other priorities.
I just add something.
Yes, of course.
For those of us that tuned into the member briefing on broadband running, competition law was actually mentioned there well by the Connecting Devon and Somerset group. They have run into similar problems with the competition law, and have found difficulty in getting around it. So it's not unique to South West Mutual.
Indeed not. Thank you, Councillor Bastow. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I was quite interested in what you were saying with regard to agriculture, etc. So I'm a farmer. There's several other people who've got farming connections. And a little bit as though you're trying to be a sort of Southwest version of Credit Agricole, which was set up in France many years ago as a cooperative, and I would imagine a sort of mutual to support agriculture and farming in France, and has grown into a fairly major pillar of the French financial establishment. So if you can get there, it'll be good. So I was interested to hear. So you're sort of focusing your activities on regenerative agriculture. The thing is, with regenerative agriculture, it's although everybody seems to have fastened upon it, I mean, it's not really that new. I mean,
oh yes, of course.
People have been doing. Yeah, and I can see my colleagues nodding. It's just there are various cliches you can use. It's reinventing the wheel. Like an old farmer said to me once, if you stand still long enough, well, you end up in front. So there's all of these things kicking around, but there's no doubt that there's a lot of interest in it, and I'm glad to hear that you're focusing on that. So presumably you'd be focusing on startups, is that right? Or people who are, how do you envisage it working?
Well, there are broadly the gaps in existing finance do focus around startups, tenant farmers that can't offer land as security for loans, smaller loan sizes, smaller farms, banks are less interested in. But the one that's interesting is actually very well established farming businesses that want to transform the way that they're farming quite significantly. They're finding necessarily the bank doesn't want to bank that because they don't understand it. Even though I completely agree with you, what we're talking about this nature-friendly farming is just going back to well-worn practices of the past.
If you're thinking of effectively winding a farm, I mean, what it involves is winding a farm business back. So in a lot of cases, there would be a lot of investment required, would there?
So I hesitate to characterise it as winding back because it's certainly true that the practices of regenerative farming or agroecology are developing all the time, and the knowledge about exactly how you can. The best practice doesn't suffer any drop in yields, actually, for example, which is a bit of a general assumption that if you move away from intensive with the high input model, that you will lose yield. But the best practices don't. There is a call for a lot more research and development to go into it to sort of see if we could bring all those businesses that are using these practices up to the level of the best. That's something in which, as a lender, you can play a role because we want to be a relationship-based lender that is able to sort of have a more able to also sort of offer support and advice or signposts for people that are sort of trying these things that haven't been done for a long time. Startups, just to specifically answer your question, yes, we do want to be able to offer loans to startups. We're working on some of that might be in partnership with another. We'll be doing the sort of loans between 50,000 upwards, but partnering with an organisation to do the smaller ones. We want to be able to cover a wide range of businesses.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm going to bow to Councillor Birch's expertise on all this, really, but I got great concerns about where the securities coming from for any funds that we might provide, which is actual public funds. Usually there's a risk attached to it. There's going to be a risk when you start loaning or lending money or something like regeneration.
Yeah, so we will be raising a separate pot, which will be the money that is actually used to lend onto these businesses. So technically, it won't be the money that you've invested. We need to raise a revolving loan fund that will be. Yeah, I'm talking to the investors that will put money into that because that's effectively a loan into that fund. That fund they'll get back. That's different from investing in the shares as you've done the business as a whole. But on the broader question, we do anticipate that a significant number of the loans will be secured on land. It's just that, unlike a bank, we want to also have the ability to consider propositions that don't have that level of security. One of the things that I am working on in this development phase is whether we can access loan guarantees from the British Business Bank, which then offer the guarantees you're referring to for those people that can't put up security. But overall, the fund is not anticipated to be a very high risk fund, unlike there are other enterprise lenders that fund small businesses that the banks won't lend to that do have quite high default rates. But our view is that we should have a credit process and an overall level of security, either from loan guarantees or from actual security on land, that would make the portfolio relatively low risk. But these are the modelling and the sort of nuance that we're working on before we'll come out with a detailed prospectus against which 20 million of money could be put into that. That would explain in detail how much security there would be.
Thank you very much, but this is not going to secure extra income for the farmer, is it?
Well, that's probably a different presentation on agroecology, but the business case for it is, like anything, you can do this successfully or you can do it unsuccessfully. But for those that are doing this successfully, they will generally diversify their income sources, and because of the much lower input costs the actual net profitability of farms applying these practices is higher than based. But there's a lot of nuance around that, and it depends on your circumstances and what you're farming and so on and so forth. But it is not true that a shift towards nature-friendly farming means giving up either yield or profitability. In fact, on profitability, it's the opposite.
You wouldn't start this setup, wherever you're going to put it together, and work it insolvent, because the figures you gave us was nearly that. So you wouldn't start without you got this extra funding, would you?
No. So, I mean, effectively, the Southwest Mutual would be acting as the fund manager for a special purpose vehicle, a limited company into which we wholly own, Southwest Mutual wholly owns, into which 20 million of funds is put by investors as loans, which they will eventually get back with interest. And it's that money is the money that we actually lend out. And then Southwest Mutual sort of, gets the revenue from running the fund, if you see what I mean. So I hope that sort of makes sense.
Councillors, any more questions? Councillor Sweet.
Thank you. I just ask you quickly, how sort of realistic and how far off of having a high street bank do you think you are? It would be an amazing to have a high street bank in the main town.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not going to put a time on it. I think I've learned that hard way that that's not a good idea. This is pioneering stuff. The frustration for me, I have to say, is as nice as it is to be named in Hansard, to be named in government levelling up white papers, we're getting zero help from government for this. And the reality is that because this is not a standard venture capital proposition where everybody's in it to try and get rich, we can't go and get money from venture capital. It does need a more patient form of capital to get us up and running. As I pointed out, all the existing mutuals were able to start pre-modern banking regulations. The Ecology Building Society, the last one that could started with £5,000. Our estimate is you can't start one now with less than £25 million to start up. So this is hard. We are lobbying and will lobby that some of the new dormant assets tranche of money, which is 800 million, can be open to applications from mutual banks to help with that startup capital. Now, if that happened, that would dramatically hasten the day when we would be able to open full bank. I don't come across people saying it's a bad idea, but unfortunately, neither do I come across people saying that's brilliant. Here's £25 million to start it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, that looks like that's it for questions. So, Mr. Green, thank you very much for updating the committee on where you are. Thanks, Matt. We wish you success with your various travails at Westminster. Thank you. Right, members, we will move on then to agenda item 8, which is the council delivery against corporate theme, and today's theme is council services, which I'm guessing is Mrs. Bowen and Councillor Pearce. Are you introducing?
Yes, thank you. I'm pleased to see Catherine here because, as you probably realise, this is not my portfolio. Councillor Hotwood is on holiday at the moment, and I've kind of been a bit dropped in it. So, and now my laptop's turned itself off, so I'll just get everything up so that sorry about this.
That's fine, Councillor Pearce.
Yeah.
Members, while Councillor Pearce is putting the information up, could I just refer, I think it's important we make reference to the fact that in section 2 of the thematic update report, it points out, I think this is important, that the performance management framework included with the Better Lives for All strategy commits that ONS will receive a specific thematic update in order to consider progress against the agreed thematic delivery plans. So what we're doing specifically, and what we're looking at today, is looking at where the progress is against where it should be. That's what we're scrutinising, just to remind you.
Can I just refer back to the last item? Councillor Birch, yeah, but he did in his questions. He did make mention of the fact that as members we haven't seen a huge amount of information. I wonder whether, with regard to the bank, I wonder whether when it publishes its annual report, if we could make sure that that is actually circulated to members.
Yeah, certainly, Councillor Smurden. I mean, my understanding, I've just been messaging Pauline, one of the colleagues, and I think we have attended the AGM, and so there will be information. And I'll ask Lisa Buckle to prepare a report and provide regular updates. Okay.
That was. Yes, I asked you a question while you weren't there.
I mean, we're still on that item on the agenda.
Councillor, we're not. We're just getting some time on Councillor Pearce pulls up. But what Mr.
I mean, I'm not happy with the response to my two questions, and I'm concerned that the council has made an investment and we're not getting a report on that investment. It was a substantial sum, and it seems to me that there are quite a few issues arising out of what we have been told. And my worry is that in the near future we're going to have an approach for further funding. If that does happen, I think we need to take independent advice on whether or not we should, as a council, continue to fund that organisation.
For the record, let Mr. Powell comment again then on what he said when you were out of the room, and then we'll move on, Councillor Pearce.
Coordination on that.
I think there's 2 points here. I think if you refer back to the decision back in 2018 to make the investment, it was based on the fact that it was an investment with principle to support the idea of setting up a bank, and there was no guarantee of return, and members made the decision in full light that it may be a loss, and that's there in the report, which we can send a link to Councillor Birch. But in terms of updates, I think it's a fair point. I know that there is an AGM each year, and that Mrs. Buckle attends that AGM, so we can provide some information and update to members on that basis to ensure that members understand the status of the investment.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. Right, I'm going to move us back on. Are we okay to carry on?
Yeah,
Right, thank you. Isolate then. Best life for all.
Okay. Right. So, yes, as your chairman has rightly said to you, it's only really to see if the activities are on track or not. There are two of the IT projects which are slightly off track, but are still moving forward. There are various reasons for the delay, which we can go into in more detail if you want to. And I would remind you that you had a fairly full report on the contact centre in the executive papers for the last executive meeting. So I think all the questions on that would probably have been answered in that report. But do you want any more introduction? Because I've got nothing much more to say than the papers are saying to you already.
Are you going to speak to Mrs. Bannon, or are we just going to go straight to question?
I haven't really got a lot to ask. It's easier if you ask specific questions, and we can draw it out that way. Thank you.
Okay, so be it. Well, we'll do as we've done before, the members, if you like. So we'll start with 1.1 questions on 1.1. Councillor Birch, yes, would you like to kick us off?
Yes, under the item key stroke issues, second bullet point, I quote, "We're working with our suppliers to resolve continuing difficulties with the back office system for environmental health and planning, but there is a significant risk that the cost of the planning system may increase, and the issues are causing a delay in the implementation of improvements identified in the service reviews discussed below." So could we perhaps have some more information, please, as to what are the significant risks and what are going to be the cost consequences that are mentioned there?
If If you have an answer, a precise answer, please give it.
I have an answer, whether it's precise or not. I think yeah, members can be the judge of that. I think at the moment the situation with the planning system relates to the GIS, which is connected to the back of the system. So we have to have very accurate mapping of applications. We've also got a relationship with the land registry in the future, so it's got to be precise. At the moment, it's not at that level of detail that is acceptable to us. So we're working with the with NEC, the provider, to ensure that we overcome those problems. With that comes some challenges. If they're unable to resolve those problems, we get into a situation where we might have to move elsewhere. We hope that they can resolve the problems. In terms of costs, I couldn't quantify that at this stage, Councillor Birch, but it's pointed out in there because it is a risk related to the delivery of that part of the action plan.
I think I can add to that the environmental health problems are about 90% resolved now, aren't they? We're nearly there on that one, so that's far less of a problem, and there won't be any extra costs on.
Looking ahead to the next 6 months, the second bullet point, creating a legal case management system to give better access to and oversight of cases. What's the position there? I think you should be able to answer this one.
I'm on safe ground now. Yes, for a long time, and obviously by personal experience in the past, we've had enormous difficulties trying to get a package together for the legal services, whereby all of the team and anybody else, for example, Drew wanted to have a look into what the allocation cases, who is dealing with, the stage they're at, is open, transparent and up to date. And in-house, Jim Davis's team is now working on a solution for that. And it's quite imminent. I'm talking to Jim with David Fairburn about how to do that, because I've got a bit of knowledge from what the package. Rather than it being in somebody's email drive or their personal drive on the computer, where if somebody's not there, they're off sick, if they've gone on holiday. It's just been a bit difficult in the past, to say the least. So that's what that one is referring to, and we're really pleased about that. And David brought a skipping rope, is absolutely delighted with the news, the oversight of the cases. So, I mean, he can just dip in and out. Somebody doesn't have to update him, you know, randomly. He can help himself if he wants to, or at a team meeting. So it's a home built system, but it's one of Jim's. In short, that's what I'm saying.
Yes, but so will this happen within the next 6 months?
I understand it will. Yes, yes.
Right. I've just got one of those.
I'm going to write that down to make sure it does.
Yeah, can we have it in the minutes?
Before you do, Councillor Birch, the question I was going to ask was, will we be based on those bullet points? Will we be back on in 6 months? Which I guess is kind of what you're asking as well, isn't it? Yeah.
I understand that the general position is yes, but I can't ask.
Anybody can guarantee that, but I mean, I think the point is that the thing is moving forward. It's just not moving forward at the speed we hope it is, and there's no definitive answer on the GIS yet. And as Bruce said, if it doesn't work, they may have to look elsewhere, but that's going to be hugely disruptive, I think, if they do have to look elsewhere. But so we'll just keep hoping that they do manage to sort it out.
Okay, go on, Councillor Birch.
Final question on the looking ahead to the next 6 months. Implementing a new mobile solution for the locality office. So what's this happening? When's it going to happen?
I don't actually know they have the answers. I'll have to come back to you. It's to do with they have the handheld pads, don't they? The locality office. They've had enormous difficulties over the years with it talking to the systems we have in the building. So it's a process and a package to resolve those issues, but I don't have the details. I'm just sorry to say. So I can bring those back and email the committee. That would be accepted.
The executive member knows the detail, but unfortunately is not here.
I will find out and let the full committee.
Does that relate to the fact? I mean, in the previous council, members had iPads, and we had a lot. There were a lot of problems then because data which was written on officers' machines, in a Windows format, wouldn't work on the iPad. So I'm assuming that what you're talking about with the locality officers is something similar, is it? So we presumably need to get them Windows-based stuff up so that it's all compatible, presumably.
I think Mr. Powell wants to come in then, Mrs. Boat.
Thank you, Chair. We're transitioning from a software provider to a new software provider in a number of different software providers. So this is part of that process. We're focusing on environmental health and on planning at the moment. We've had some BEN systems and others all in place and working. The mobile locality system, which is based on iPads, will need to move to a new platform. So it's simply another stage of the transition.
Okay. Members, any more questions on 1.1? No, in which case we will move on then to 1.2. It's the strategy setting out how customers can access our services in the future, face-to-face, online or on the phone. And you will note again that the overall rating here is amber off track. So do we have any questions around that? Councillor Smurden.
Yes, Chair. With regard to the reception, which is currently closed and has been obviously because of COVID, etc. Other councils are reopening their receptions. I know that Teignbridge are, because my daughter actually works in reception at Teignbridge, and they've recently reopened it admittedly on a pretty low level basis, but people can now come to reception. I would like to think that maybe officers could look into the the viability or and the need, etc., with regard to considering reopening, whether or not we need to reopen the reception at Politan.
This came up in some detail in the paper that was presented at the executive meeting last time, and there was a Gantt chart at the end of that report that showed that the reception would open again in June or July. Now, I know the one at West Devon has just reopened, so I think there will be imminent talks about how it's going to open, but I'm sure it's going to be on a reduced scale, whatever it is, because we are very keen that channel shift should happen as much as possible, and that now we are offering everything online, that we move people over into applying online. There are several reasons for that. It is much more efficient for the customer, and it is much more efficient for the council if these things are dealt with online. It is much cheaper for the council to deal with things online, and it is extremely expensive to see people face to face. Now, we know there are instances where people do need to have face to face meetings, and there are instances where people need to phone us, but both of those are much more expensive than online contact. So wherever possible, we want to encourage the public into online contact, only because actually their problem, if it's a simple one, is going to get sorted out much quicker online than it will do by talking to somebody on the phone or coming into reception.
Thank you. I have a question, but I'm just looking to see if any other member has a question. Okay, well, I'll ask at this stage then. Under the key risks and issues, the second bullet point is putting the customer first and making a difference to the customer. I was a little bit confused as to whether that was down as a risk or an issue, if you see what I mean.
I think what I meant by that was there is a danger people get buried in the detail of all the actions that they're taking, and they don't necessarily think of the process that they're developing might have customer as a first point. So that was just trying to get across that it is a risk, that people sort of get really excited about doing something, but they forget that there's a customer at the what they need, rather than something shiny we think they should have, say, for example, that it is something that will help them access services.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. That makes sense. That's great. Any other questions on 1.2, members? No, we're broadly content then that with what's looking ahead of the next 6 months, we're content.
Yes, we'll be getting, the executive will be getting a report next month on the high level strategy.
Right, okay, in the absence of any questions, we'll move on then. Right, members, on the basis that 1.3 through to 1.7 are all on an overall rating of green on track, I'm going to propose that we take any questions on any of those now on block, because clearly 1.1 and 1.2 are the ones that we're scrutinising. Councillor Birch.
1.3.
Councillor Birch, sorry.
I'll start again. So under key highlights, it says the communications team are currently working with officers and then lead members to develop a forward plan, consultation, engagement and communication activities for the coming 12 months aligned to each of the Better Lives for All themes. And then it says looking ahead to the next 6 months, it says finalise our 12-month consultation engagement activities programme with lead member input. I just think it would be helpful that within that process or within the next 6 months, that this committee has an opportunity of being consulted on the proposed consultation and engagement activity programme, as I'm sure we'd be able to make a valuable contribution towards it. It just talks about a lead member input, but I do think it would be helpful for this committee to have an opportunity to have its input into the process.
Well, I guess having had a task and finish from this committee on consultation, I suppose I'd ask the leader how she feels about that. Question from Councillor Birch.
Well, I have to confess that at the moment, this is at the level still with the portfolio holder. So the rest of the executive have not yet actually been consulted on this. So until we have, I don't know how useful or otherwise it would be for overview and scrutiny to do that. But we can certainly ask the portfolio holder to report back to you, Chairman, with as to whether she thinks that would be a good idea or not.
Councillor Birch, are you content that we follow that path of action? I think that's what it sounds like.
I'm just concerned that it'll end up at an executive meeting without any input from members, and in particular overview and scrutiny. So I don't want to see us miss the boat there.
No, I'm sure. I mean, it's not fair because the executive member's not here, but I'm sure if we ask the question as whether she'd like us to be a critical friend in that process, I'm sure she would consider that. In terms of going about that, the best way of doing that would be to contact the exec member. I think probably.
Sorry, Chairman, I will certainly report back to her when she gets back. But yes, I'm sure she'd welcome contact from you as well.
Thank you very much, Councillor Birch. Thank you, Councillor Birch. Any members, any more questions on those 1.3 through to 1.7, the ones that are showing as green on track? Another one from Councillor Birch. Go on, Councillor Birch. Sorry. That's fine.
Yeah. Looking at 1.4, it's really the same theme. It says looking ahead for the next 6 months, agree a plan and the questions for the resident satisfaction engagement with lead member and consultation for the survey from the end of September, 6 weeks, results to executive December 2022. Again, I think that this is a matter that would benefit from the input from this committee. So whilst you're talking to the lead executive member on the previous item, I think it would be useful that we also have an input into the resident satisfaction survey before it goes to the executive on December 2022.
I will include that in my email to Councillor Hopwood, Councillor Birch. Assuming Betty, I'm happy that is a sensible course of action. Yeah, I'm seeing nods. Thank you.
One more, but I think I could probably deal with it in the next item, and that is the last item, which is 1.6. Looking ahead to the next 6 months, a fully resourced legal team to support the organisation in delivering its priorities whether we want to deal with that now or whether we deal with, because it is specific.
We'll take it as a
agenda item. Can I suggest we leave it until?
We'll take it as a separate agenda item, please, Councillor Birch.
That's more than just a question.
No, it's down on the agenda, so we'll take it at that point. Thank you. Okay, members, I'm assuming then that there were no other questions on 1.3 through to 1.7, which are all shown as green on track, which seems to be an appropriate course of action. So thank you very much, Mrs. Bone. Thank you, Councillor Pearce, for standing in on that one, and we will move on. Thank you. So where are we? Yeah. I think the next report is verbal, isn't it? Which is thank you very much. Yeah, okay, so item 9 is the progress of recruitment on future lawyers. There we are. So I don't know who's delivering that verbal update. Is that you, Mr. Powell?
Certainly can, Chair. Yeah, I think it was simply asked for an update on recruitment. And simply at the moment, we've got an advert out for 5 lawyers within the team. And we will report back at the next meeting, hopefully, with news to confirm that we've employed 5. It would be fantastic news if we have.
Any questions for Mr. Powell? Councillor Birch?
I'll make a question as well as a comment, because I mean this arose as a result of matter arising at the last meeting. I mean the legal department section, or whatever you want to call it, it's in a grim state of affairs with 5 lawyers down. The chance of recruiting 5 lawyers is going to be extremely challenging, and I'm not at all optimistic. The worry, as far as I see, that the council has a department that has suffered from shortages, lack of recruitment, or failure to recruit quite a while now. And as a result of this, the council is being unable to deliver the various services, etc. And I can give you some examples of what's happening in Topness, and I'm sure it's happening elsewhere. I mean, for example, the executive in May 2018 agreed a lease with a organisation in Topness. I won't go into detail, but it agreed, it resolved to grant a lease to an organisation in Topness in May 2018. That is still outstanding. It's now 4 years on, and it's still outstanding. It's a very unhappy organisation because, and it, in my view, it all boils down to a lack of legal resources within this council. On top of that, some of us attended a meeting this morning to do with the Topness Leisure Centre. Again, legal documentation was sent out in March 2019, and still the matter is not resolved. It's a very frustrating position, and as a result of that, improvements to the leisure centre at Topness have been delayed by nearly 3 years, resulting in an additional cost of £400,000 or thereabouts. On top of that, just to add to the sorry saga, I raised a legal query on a planning application that was made by an applicant in January, and that has only just recently been resolved. On top of that, there are in some areas, or in a particular area of Topness, there is trespassing carrying out, and I drew this to the attention of the council. The answer I got back is we can't do anything about it because we don't have sufficient legal resources to deal with it. That was one of the reasons for not being able to deal with it. Those are just 4 examples, and I think we as a council have a department that is just not functioning. And I think the way that this needs to be addressed is not just for us to wait and see whether or not there have been sufficient applications for the vacant post. I think we as a council need to take steps to actually look at the legal department, see how it operates. Now, looking in how other councils operate, in a they combine their resources. I mean, they have what's called public sector frameworks, where legal authorities get together and appoint a panel of solicitors who deal with specific items. For example, they have what's called a London Borough Legal Alliance. That's where all the councils in London have got together and sorted out a combined way of dealing with legal issues. And that's, there are other ways of dealing with this rather than just recruiting lawyers. And therefore, I think what we as a committee ought to do, and this is just the kind of thing that this committee should address, is to actually set up a task and finish group to look into this and to come forward with proposals, go to the executive. Task and finish group needs to crawl all over this, look at where the weaknesses are, look at where we're unable to service the other departments within the council, and to come forward with a recommendation to the executive. I think by just doing nothing, we are not, the legal department within this council is not operating in a proper manner.
Mr. Powell, do you want to respond from an officer's perspective?
Yes, Chair, certainly, thank you. I'm not going to comment on the individual cases, Councillor Birch, but by all means, if you provide the details, I'm more than happy to respond to those. I think we're certainly not just sitting back and waiting to see whether what we can recruit people. We are using agency people at the moment to fill the vacancies. We've committed to decisions made to have 2 extra lawyers to support the planning service, which was made back in the autumn. I'm not going to pretend it's easy to find lawyers at the moment. It isn't. And on the basis of that, we've reviewed our pay to ensure that we are offering salaries at the same sort of level as other local authorities. And, we have done a review, an internal review of the team and what we need, the capacity, the skill set and the way that we should set up. And that's been done with Mr. Fairburn, myself and others. So we are actively trying to get a team up that has the capacity, has the resilience and the skill set to support the council. There have been difficulties. We don't just rely on our own in-house lawyers. We use other authorities. We use external law firms as well. So it's not a one size fits all in terms of solutions. So, as I say, we're out to advert. We really hope we will recruit. We're actively trying to do that. We do not leave vacancies. We have agency people in place to ensure that there is resilience within the service. But undoubtedly, having stability with a selection of employed officers will put us in a better position than we're in now. As for a task and finish group, that's not a decision for me, it's one for members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Powell. Mr. Birch, are you standing by your
Yeah, I'd like to put forward a proposal.
do you believe that there is expertise amongst the committee to formulate that recommendation? That's my only question.
Task and finish group under our constitution is entitled call on external experts or consultants to advise it on the options that are open to it and that it may wish to consider. I'm not suggesting for one moment that members of the task and finish group will have the expertise to address the issues, but I think it's something that I think the first thing it must do is to identify the problems, and then identifying the problems is to look at the solutions. And it may well be that looking in the solutions that we may have to call on third parties to advise us. In other words, ALDC, sorry, not ALDC, the Local Government Association, surely have expertise within their organisation that can assist us on the various options that are available to this council in addressing or providing legal services. And I'm sure they would do it free of charge.
Okay, and you'd like that proposal to stand irrespective of our update on the 21st of the next month? You'd like us to consider this proposal now?
By the time we set it up, I mean, if our problems are resolved on the 21st of July, then I'll withdraw my proposal, but I don't think it will be.
Okay, would anyone like to, as a proposal on the table, cast?
Yeah, I can't believe that there's any way forward on this when all we're going to do as an OS committee is to look at what's happening internally at the moment. You know, because I think exactly what Councillor Burgess said should be happening internally. I'm sure it is.
Yeah, I mean, apologies, I didn't really. Okay.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Chairman. Well, I can't see the point of a task and finish group because I've never seen a task and finish group operating that has come to a conclusion. As yet, we've still got outstanding task and finish groups that are in action. I don't know when they last came forward with their final conclusions, but if we haven't got the staff, how are we going to have a task and finish group that's going to be manned? We've got to remember our own staff, our clerical staff, and they've got loads to do. They're overworked anyway, and we're taking on this. The Birches refer to the fact that we're 5 solicitors down. I don't actually see that on this item that we're discussing at present. And he's mentioned individual cases, but they probably have got a reason why they've not been concluded as yet. And we don't know the answers to that. So I can't support his proposal. Thank you.
I'm going to just come back on a point of information before I come to you, Councillor Birch. Thank you, Councillor Ray. Just that we've now seen. So there has been evidence in this council of task and finishes that have actually finished. I know Councillor Smurden chaired one on leisure, indeed, that is also finished. So I think there is evidence of task and finishes working. Whether you support the need for this one or not is a separate matter, but there is absolutely evidence that they work. Councillor Birch.
Yeah, two things. First of all, Councillor Rowe, if you'd like to read the agenda, it says to note that all 5 vacancies. That's actually in the agenda. So you might like to just look at that carefully. Yes, that's number one. Number two, there are not any outstanding task and finish groups. All task and finish groups that were set up by this, with with the exception of one, which is Councillor Smurden, which is near its conclusion. There are no task and finish groups who are outstanding or have outstanding tasks. They all have done what they were set out to do. The beauty of task and finish groups is the second word, finish. They're given a date to finish and they all finish. And therefore, I think your arguments about there's too many task and finish groups, that doesn't stand up. Number two, there are 5 vacancies. As far as the outstanding task and finish group is concerned, that is nearly concluded, and no doubt Councillor Smurden will report on that in the next item in the agenda. So I'm afraid what you're saying doesn't stand up.
Right, okay. You've put a proposal on the table. Is any member willing to second the proposal for a task and finish group to look into legal services within the council? I'm looking around. Councillor Abbott, you are prepared to second. Okay, so there is a proposal on the table to set up a task and finish from Councillor Birch, as discussed, to look at internal matters. Councillor Smurden, do you want to speak?
Can I just say that I don't disagree with, I don't disagree with what Councillor Birch is saying. But on the other hand, I also agree, I feel that I agree with Councillor Spencer because, Councillor Taylor, that the group is just going to come back with recommendations to Mr. Powell to do what they're well, whatever. its recommendations will be to do what they sound to be doing already. I mean, Mr. Pell gave us a fairly thorough breakdown of what they are doing to, to try and remedy this situation. I mean, I'm glad to hear that they're looking into, contract people. I mean, obviously, from a planning point of view, if there's a shortage of planning officers, then we contract those in. It's a bit of a random question, but I mean, is working in local authority as a legal specialist, is that attractive enough within the legal profession? I don't know. You would.
Can I just, Mr. Chairman, the problem of local government is that local government pay for solicitors is extremely low. The pay that is in private practice for solicitors is probably twice as much as local government. And what in fact is happening is all the expertise is with firms of solicitors. And what in fact has happened is that the local authorities throughout the country have latched onto this. And that is why they formed these networks to have within them panels of solicitors. In other words, if we as an organization were in a public sector framework, that framework would have within it a number of panel solicitors that we could go to. For example, if it was for a commercial lease, you go to a panel that does a commercial lease. They have all quoted, they've all given fixed rates, etc. And it's working throughout London. It's working throughout large parts of the country. This is something that we as a council, with the problems that we got, we certainly need to look into. I'm not suggesting we do that. I'm thinking it's something we need to look into. And the way to do this is through a task and finish group. And that, we can't, in my view, we can't just stand by and just hope and pray that we're going to find sufficient solicitors. It will not happen because of the discrepancy between pay in local government and private practice.
Thank you, Councillor Birch. Okay, we have a proposition from Councillor Birch to set up a task and finish, seconded by Councillor Abbott. So I will ask all those in favour of setting up a task and finish as described to show, please. That's 3 Jacks. All those against? That's 5. Abstentions? Thank you very much. Okay, apologies, Councillor Birch, that one falls on the floor.
Can I just make a suggestion or a point? In that it's obvious, from his background and from what he said today, that Councillor Birch has considerable expertise in this field, and there must be some way in which having a member with that expertise that can become available to the council. So I'm looking at Mr. Powell here. Right. So you see what I'm saying, Drew? I mean, there must be with the expertise that is available, we should be making use of it.
Certainly, I mean, especially on the promise of low fees, I'm more than happy to have a conversation with Councillor Birch outside the meeting. But in all seriousness, absolutely, we want to explore all the options, enable us to provide a fit and proper